Less than 10 minutes to go, guys. Part 13. If you've hung on for this long, oh, I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know how I do.
His intelligence showed most particularly in his ability to bring a genuine intellectual excitement to the Republican stage.
His intelligence brings intellectual excitement. Break that one down for me.
In addition to accounting for his preternatural early business success, if Ramaswamy went bad, became disillusioned, resentful, angry, it might be in the narcissistic direction, like Trump, like so many in the political entertainment and media realm.
Ooh, he almost said something too disparaging about Trump. So now let's spread it out. There's so many out there, right? It's not just Trump. You can see even when there's like a hint of him that wants to bring it to something more moderated, more matter of fact about a damning characteristic, it needs to be smoothed out. It needs to be, oh, it's not just Trump, it's everybody. There's so many out there, don't you know? And we're concerned about every one of them, not just Trump.
But the fact that he is part of this team of high performers
Also, it's still not a team.
means, number one, that he will be required in the best possible way to watch his words and actions, and number two, that he will be surrounded by the kind of wise counsel that can help him mature into a person even more remarkable than he is now.
Does anybody remember how many of these same kind of sentiments were offered about the mitigating forces for Trump? All the people he's going to surround himself by, all the people that were wiser than him, that were more experienced than him. Have we all just forgotten that giant, has that been memory hold? The idea that like somebody with an agenda or somebody with the most or dictatorial potential, absolute power is just going to somehow moderate. I'll never forget listening to like Philosophize This, and they're talking about Heidegger, I think, and Heidegger thought that he could persuade Hitler to be more reasonable. And I had a friend in college that I said had a Heidegger complex because he really just thought he could be the whisper in everyone's ear and everything would just be okay. The ego and the fantasy, uh, the lack of appreciation for how power works, and more importantly, how it's twisting you in your perception of how it works, is on full display.
His youth might be regarded as a hindrance insofar as he is less experienced than he might be, even arguably somewhat overconfident. But it is also a marked advantage in that Vivek is not living in 1995 or even 2005 and is very much part of the online digital generation during the most rapid time of technological transformation in human history. I have not yet met JD Vance.
One last thing on Vivek. So, because Vivek is plugged in online, he's not going to be subject necessarily to all of the same pitfalls and bullshit and mental pathologies that have been bred into uh, his cohort or people younger than him. I think is the suggestion there. It's actually an asset to have somebody plugged in because now with all of his ideas, he'll be able to let them bob and weave and sway with whatever I guess agenda Trump brings to the table. I don't really know, but he's a smart guy who's very busy brained, and his youth is actually more of an asset than a hindrance, which makes me think Jordan was like refuting someone who particularly articulated that as a problem once. I don't know who he's speaking to about that.
Although we have a podcast planned. I have read his book, however, much of it twice. I also watched his debate with Governor Walz.
His book, hotly explored and refuted. And check out the If Books Could Kill podcast.
The Democrat VP candidate very carefully. The first thing to understand about Vance, like Vivek, like Kennedy, like Musk, is his intelligence.
There it is. He's so smart. So now everything that follows is just going to be extension of that smartness. Get ready.
You don't pull yourself out of the serious backwoods of Appalachia and graduate from law school at Yale without some 95th or even 99th percentile intelligence.
Yep, I get. Maybe. Also, questionable that that's what he did, but whatever.
He also appears mature for his age, even more so than Vivek, for whom he is perhaps a match in raw cognitive power. I suspect as well that JD is highly conscientious, as it is that trait, second only to intelligence, which best predicts upward mobility. And he is certainly...
Yes, because these guys need to continue moving up. They're not rich enough, they're not famous enough, they don't have enough influence, they don't have enough potential. We need to predict more success in the form of corrosive power grabs.
The poster child for the American dream in the land where anyone can become president. He is as well extroverted, particularly on the assertiveness side rather than enthusiastic, and appears both more compassionate and perhaps more polite than Trump and Vivek.
That's why he accuses people of eating pets and confidently lies if it keeps him in the news.
Vance writes with real love of the people in his life in Hillbilly Elegy, which is genuinely a people rather than idea-centered book. That is not a criticism, by the way, merely an observation, as I have already commented positively on his intelligence. I think the Republican vice presidential contender will bring a whole other level of concern for the working class to the Trump X-Men team, not least because he is not dismissive of his past, as so many who have escaped upward tend to be, joining the elites in their contempt for the workers and the inhabitants of the lower rungs of the economic ladder.
Let's ask ChatGPT real quick what JD Vance's voting record is. Vance has opposed the extension of the Affordable Connectivity Program, which assists low-income families with internet bills. Vance wants to propose an amendment to reduce federal spending by substantial cuts to social programs and services that benefit low-income families. He's opposed the Affordable Care Act. He supports the tax cuts for billionaires, and that comes along with the tax increases for people who are low income. Instead of funding schools, he's for school choice and vouchers, which statistics show the vast majority of low-income households don't use because they don't have the transportation or the money to afford the schools they might quote-unquote choose. And this concludes the most research I'm willing to briefly kind of do in this series.
I detected a profound absence of such dismissive sentiment in Hillbilly Elegy, a work that was instead characterized by the substantive gratitude of the well-integrated personality. Vance is also a very good speaker.
Vance wrote a propaganda book on selling himself, and so that means that his voting record and stated policy agenda doesn't matter.
That's the extroversion as well as raw cognitive power. Fast on his feet and also no pushover, despite his people-centered outlook. He holds his temper very well. So he appears low in the neuroticism aspect of volatility, more stable in that regard than the Donald, whom he defended in his debate better than the former president managed for himself, and has also overcome many serious obstacles.
Like initially calling Trump America's Hitler, right? Like that kind of stuff?
In his uphill climb. Thus, he appears low as well in withdrawal. Vance is another person who, like Tulsi Gabbard, is unlikely to panic under difficult conditions. This is a very positive attribute in a leader. He is another person likely to be a steadying managerial hand, balancing the dangerous brilliance of some of the other members of the Trump coterie.
Dangerous brilliance. It's like sexy and attractive when he puts it that way, right? It's supposed to kind of excite you, these dangerous and brilliant people, as long as they've got these moderating voices also on the X-Men team.
Do I have any reservations? Having said all this, about the new Trump X-Men team? Of course. First, it is a dreadfully creative consortium.
Oh, the worst I can say about them is they just work too hard. It's these creative types, these people that you explicitly said were not the artists and the creatives and da 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 earlier in your video, are now like catastrophically creative. And it's just that feverish creativity that's going to get them in trouble, not their fascism or their money or their petty vindictive retaliatory actions to anybody who wants to hold them accountable, right? It's the creativity. Fuck, you're right.
And it is not at all obvious that under normal conditions, creative brilliance is the first thing to want in political leaders, who should mostly play an administrative role under normal conditions. However, the current situation in the US and abroad is not normal, and something out of the box may well be necessary in consequence.
We had the out of the box. We got a lot of catastrophic consequences, none of which Peterson is willing to explore or belabor. And so now we're just treating it like a big reset button has been hit, and we have no idea what would happen. Fascinating.